he would go from whatever to second in playoff points. He'd have more than Truex at that point. So these are all things that you these teams, they know this. They know that this is how a championship's won, is these little points here, little points there. What is up, everybody, and welcome back to the DK Garage. I'm Jeremy.
And I'm Joe.
Ooh, man, this has been a long break. A lot has kind of happened during this break, besides racing. But damn, it is good to be back at it. How excited are you for the Glen this weekend?
I'm really excited to get the action underway, and we talked, we actually had a podcast episode during the break, and we talked about a lot of things that are left to unfold, and we've got a nice little stretch of 4 races before the playoffs get underway, so this regular season finish is sure to be exciting.
Lots of strategy to talk about, both for our lineups, but also what the teams, their strategy is going to be, because some teams know they got a chance at the Glen. I think a lot of teams know they probably don't. So they're going to be looking at the following week, Michigan, and most teams will probably have Daytona circled. 2 weeks for these crews to work on the cars and the future cars. So these last 4 weeks are going to be very exciting.
It definitely will be. We've got a link above to that previous episode, so if you want to get our full thoughts on how we think this might, I guess, stack up at the end of the regular season, our kind of viewpoints on that, talked a lot of silly season news too, because there's still dominoes falling, and Ross Chastain is now part of Team Trackhouse.
Yeah, I'm not super surprised by this. I think maybe some people were, just because the Kurt Busch situation still, that domino hasn't fallen. We don't know for sure if 2311 is going to have a charter or be able to do a second car. So that might be a little bit alarming to some people, but most people by now kind of assume he's going there. I think keeping Chastain with the drivers that are available, I mean, there's a couple you can make a point for, but I think Chastain, he's young, but he's not inexperienced. He's really done well with that car this year. Been great on road courses, which we'll get to. I don't know. Is there anybody in your mind that you thought would be a better driver to get for that one car than Ross Chastain?
Kurt Busch, and that was the only really driver that I think topped it for me. I think it was great to see Ross Chastain get a ride. He doesn't bring a lot of funding along with him, but Justin Marks said he didn't care. He liked that aspect, that there was no additional funding behind Ross Chastain. He can really mold him into what they want him to be. He doesn't have to worry about that aspect, it sounds like, as of now, but he'll develop into that, especially as this team continues to grow and get solidified. Pitbull brings plenty of funding, I'm sure. That really is something that probably allowed for them to get a talented driver like Ross Chastain that doesn't bring that much funding and develop them.
Yeah, I don't imagine there's much profit margins in watermelons these days. Obviously, inflation is probably making watermelons a little more expensive, but I don't think you're getting much funding from that. So the fact that they got Pitbull kind of in their back pocket, and I'm sure there's going to be other guys that other sponsors that want to come on, be a part of that team. Because really, we've talked about it kind of throughout the year. Daniel Suarez has had a really good season, better than what I think most people expected out of this team. If they can carry that over into this new car, which seems to be, from everything we're hearing, going to be a really good road course car. That's something that Ross Chastain's been doing really well at this year. And if they have another season like this year where they got like 7 on the schedule, dude, watch out for him next year.
Yeah, I think these younger drivers that have shown their ability on the road courses have gotten really good rides because the schedule has kind of adapted to become more of a road course 750 dominance on the schedule. So you're looking at it where these guys like Ross Chastain, Tyler Reddick now, he's shown a lot of development and strengths in there. And then you get Christopher Bell, who won earlier this season in the road course, Chase Briscoe. He's another guy that has been shown his ability on the road course. And then guys coming up, Austin Cindric. You just keep on looking at how prevalent some of these drivers are on road courses, and they're getting these rides at younger ages and having success. It's pretty awesome to see. And I think as we get into this new next generation car, these younger drivers are going to be on level playing fields on this first year for sure, and they might find an upper hand and find themselves in the right spot to win a championship at a very young age. We're going to find out how it ultimately plays out, but it's sure to be interesting.
Well, the average age of the drivers is dropping dramatically over these last couple of years, and going into next year, I think Gibbs is going to have essentially probably the oldest team with Truex, Hamlin, and Kyle Busch there, even with Christopher Bell being so young and on that team. It's quite the youth movement, but let's
just go ahead and
let's get into this because man, it's been fun having the time off, but it is really good to be back at it. Cheers.
It's something that I've been looking forward to getting into the data and everything. I know we kind of touch on a lot of silly season news in our full extended podcast, so that's something I think where we really kind of put together the way we think things might shape up, because this playoff picture is going to be cloudy, I'm sure, as we get down to this nitty-gritty stretch. Back-to-back road courses. I think we should probably talk some strategy and stuff that is involved in these road course environments, because they're really endurance-based kind of races. They are shorter lap-wise, mileage-wise, typically too. A lot more corners. They do turn right, so there are a lot of different obstacles that play into it. So strategy in the DFS environment is also a little bit different for them as well.
Yeah, I think they turn right more at this track than they do left. So even getting on pit road is to the right. So that's always fun. But you mentioned it, a lot less laps. There's only 90 laps in this race. It's only a 220-mile event. It's a 2.45-mile track, Watkins Glen. It is sort of the NASCAR circuit. There's lots of different configurations at Watkins Glen. There's the full sort of Grand Prix kind of track there. I forget off the top of my head how long that is. It's like over 3 miles, but they don't run the full stint. I love the track that they have here. I think I've mentioned this in one of our previous podcasts. Anytime I'm having a little fun racing a little NASCAR, or really any racing game, this particular layout, this track is my favorite to do. It's so fun. It's fast, and really good braking zones. It really doesn't matter what car it is. I always have fun on it, and it's one of the best road course tracks I think to watch. NBC over the last few years, they've done a really good job with their radio style broadcast, where one guy's got a section, he's telling it through, and then they kick it off to the next guy. Really exciting. Hopefully they'll get it down. I was listening to the I think it was the Ask Junior portion of his podcast this week, and he's like, yeah, normally we get to have a little practice with their practice and qualifying, but they're just like the drivers. It's all right, green flag, let's go. So that'll be fun. There'll probably be a little slip-ups here and there, especially between Burton and Junior. But this is like I said, this is one of my favorite tracks. There's only 63 performance points, though. So strategy is a little different than short tracks and whatnot. We'll get into that. And stages are 20, 20, and 50. Have you heard about a comp caution?
Lap 10, we'll have a competition caution, so that will be coming pretty early and play into kind of some of the strategy, I'm sure, that for some of these teams.
And the last previous winner here, the two-time previous winner, Chase Elliott. He is going for a three-peat. Even though they didn't race here last year, he would be 3 in a row for him. I believe the last and maybe only driver to do that here at this track was Jeff Gordon, and he's chasing him as far as the all-time road course wins. That's going to be exciting. So One of the things I was kind of thinking before we get into the stats of the driver, we got a lot we're going to get into since we covered so much in that podcast last week. If we're looking at kind of the list of drivers this week, before we get into a lot of the stats, we've obviously discussed some of this. Who do you feel like is really targeting this race for potential win or just maximum points? Like, who do you think has this race circled, and who do you think is not that focused on this race from a NASCAR perspective?
From a NASCAR perspective, I think Denny Hamlin has got this one kind of circled. They could get a win here as an outsider, but I think they are going to play it points wise to continue their advantage, hopefully, in case it does come down to a crazy scenario where if he performs strongly here and at the next road course, which he is capable of doing, he's going to find himself in a decent position. Somebody, I think, Kyle Larson, he can just go for it. I think he has nothing really to lose. He's going to be in a position to start up towards the front, could be able to have some strategy playing in the mix with that early competition caution. So I think those are two drivers that are in different spots and are different in the DraftKings environment, and I'll have different exposure to both of them, and definitely in different scenarios as well.
Who do you think is not? Who's one of those drivers that we might be looking at doing well? Our teams that's doing well, but this doesn't really fit their wheelhouse, and they probably don't have this track circled.
Austin Dillon. I think that's why he's kind of probably 6,100. I don't think they have it circled. I think it's something that he's said before that they don't necessarily do great on road courses, but I think he's also shown that he has improved. And at the price tag he is this week, I think finds an extreme upside. I just don't think they have this one circled as something that they have to come out and dominate at.
See, I would disagree because they are in a tight points battle with their teammate, Tyler Reddick. And I don't think that they want to hang their hat too much on Michigan, and they certainly don't want to go into Daytona needing a win. Austin Dillon doesn't have the best road course numbers, but I believe it was the last 3 road courses. His average finishes are like around 12th. Not the best day, but that's a pretty solid day. Someone I'm kind of, and we'll obviously, if you check out the race guide, you'll know we already have this guy circled, but Kevin Harvick. This team has not been great on road courses at all this year, and he's decent at road courses, but their road course package is just garbage this year. And he doesn't have the best numbers really here at the Glen either. To me, I have a feeling this team, they probably got a little bit more into Indy, but I think they're probably going all in on Michigan. I think they know that is their best chance to get into the playoffs. Obviously, they're still going to try to put a good car out there, and they got good track starting position. But I feel like that team is one of those teams that is due for a potential letdown because they're not going to be as focused on this race.
Yeah, I completely understand that point of view where you're coming from, because usually whenever you look at previous data from races, Kevin Harvick's near the top of everything. He's nowhere near that whenever you start getting into Watkins Glen specifically, and then this year on road courses, it's just been really poor performance from that team. So, yeah, I completely understand where you're coming from, and I would tend to try to avoid Harvick at all costs this week. If you check out our race guide, that link's down below. We kind of target him as one of our in our driver spotlight as one of our as the red flag. So if you go check that out, we've got a lot of other great information to go along with what we're talking about here. There's a DK Insights portion that touches on some of the cool key data points that we feel are relevant to this weekend. And then also we build a couple core lineups and try to help give you some balanced approach to lineup builds so that you can really go after it the way that you want to. So try to go check that out if you haven't checked it out before. It's available for free on our Patreon, so the link's below, and it really helps us out. But Jeremy, there's a lot of things to get into with some of these guys at the top, I think, too.
Well, because I'm looking at this, to build the proper lineups, you need to also be aware of the situation, that the real thing that's happening, and these drivers are not out there.
How the season's playing out.
How the season's playing out, because these drivers, to be honest, they don't give a flying crap about us in their lineups and all this other stuff. They have a certain job to do, and so you got to kind of really know when is good times to target someone and when is not. And obviously, those are never foolproof because, hey, it's NASCAR. Things kind of can surprise you. But the last race, we were not as high on him. We weren't expecting this, but we did note, hey, Amarola was really solid at New Hampshire. And obviously that team is desperate, so they were going to go for it. That was one of those tracks that they had targeted, and they came away with a win. So I think being aware of the situation that NASCAR is in, or these drivers, these teams are in, especially as we're getting close to the end of the regular season. We have 13 drivers locked in, and we have some big names not locked in, Hamlin and Harvick being the biggest of those. So to kind of eliminate, unless you're doing 150 max, I would never eliminate really anyone, because it's just a different style of playing. But if you're doing just a few lineups, 20 or less or something like that, really understanding at this point in the year what these teams are trying to do, I think is very critical. For example, Hamlin is only 13 points up from the regular season championship on Kyle Larson. Kyle Larson has the most playoff points at 32. He wins the regular season championship. That's an extra 15. That's almost a guaranteed lock into the championship with where he's at now. You get that many points up, and you're in that round of 8, unless something catastrophic happens before then. Obviously, we know what happened with Harvick last year, but he's good at all those tracks in that last round. He doesn't even have to perform that well, and he could kind of backdoor his way in. That team could essentially be working for 3 whole weeks on the Phoenix car. That's huge for that team. Hamlin, only 5 playoff points, no wins. Those are all just stage wins. He needs the regular season championship, because that's another 15. That's at least 20, possibly some extra stage wins, so that would be a couple extra points there. He's good at a lot of these tracks. He could perform really well at almost every track in the playoffs. But if he's not in it, doesn't matter. So those are some of the things I kind of wanted to bring up. Another point is, Chase Elliott, he's too far back to try to win the regular season championship. But he still wants to be higher up. He still wants to get those wins and stage points. So he's at 11 right now. Let's just say he wins the next 2 road courses, the next 2 races. That's going to be an extra 10 points. That's 21. And he would probably also have the stage wins to go with it, so that'd be a couple extra. He would go from whatever to second in playoff points. He'd have more than Truex at that point. So these are all things that these teams, they know this. They know that this is how a championship's won, is these little points here, little points there. That's why I kind of think it's important to kind of break down, okay, where are we at in the season, and what are these teams really trying to do?
And I think that's why you and I have had decent success over the years at doing the DFS thing, is because we have these conversations, and we were like, hey, let's try to find a way to get this out to people so we can have these conversations in front of them, because this scenario that you just laid out is the difference between the winners and losers in this environment, because you have to understand how the teams are approaching it, all the different metrics that are being measured by these teams, and which ones really apply to the situation we're in right now and which one doesn't. So you really have to hone in on the drivers in the right spots, and this week is really, I think, the start of the crunch time, where you really have to understand and pay attention to pretty much every piece of information that's been made available, because everything's changing right now. Everybody's really trying to really hone in their ability to get things done at this point in the season, because we're really coming down to crunch time.
Well, and another point that I just thought of that normally isn't something that we think about, but we brought this up at one of our first episode, or one of the first ones. This is the last year of this gen car. There's 14 races left with this car model, and then it becomes obsolete. So which teams are going all out, and which teams are just saying, look, we're in it for next year? I think had Amarola not gotten that win, that team is probably saying, hey, look, let's start focus, do what we can do this year, but they're not putting a bunch of effort. Well, now they're in the playoffs. Now that team's going to be going for it. If Harvick doesn't make it, well, then he's likely to not do very good the rest of the year. He might have a couple tracks where they have circled to try to get him a win, get that thing going, of course. But with the car going away at the end of the year, you got to think that has some strategy with how these teams approach these races too, because that's a lot of money.
Yep. And the two favorites coming in are the two favorites at most road courses, Chase Elliott and Martin Truex. You mentioned how much of a benefit it would be for Chase Elliott to get the 2 wins in this scenario where we're here and then an Indy road course, and he'd be able to get to second place in points, and it's a nice jump, especially headed into this part of the season. What's the outlook for Martin Truex? Because I know, looking at a lot of things and the data we've gone through, I really think this could be a Martin Truex kind of day, and it's priced on the DraftKings board next to Chase Elliott. They're going to probably be fairly highly owned, and people are going to have to pick between the two. It's going to be hard to want to pick one or the other.
So when you really start to get into the stats of it, the guys that they have at the top of the salary board for DraftKings, Kyle Busch, Chase Elliott, Martin Truex, those really are the guys lately, road course wise, that are gobbling up these performance points. They're the ones getting the high finishes, the wins, the laps led, the fastest laps. Now we can throw Kyle Larson in there, and he was obviously good at the Coda race. Probably would have won that had it gone the full length. Blah blah blah. We've talked about that. But really, the Sonoma was the main one that he really popped. Road America, he was good at early, but he faded. Watkins Glen is, before this year, you would probably say this is the better of the road courses for him. Obviously, he's on a team that has Chase Elliott, so I would think that his road course car is going to be pretty stout. But if you kind of eliminate him, just kind of push him down a little bit, it really comes down to those top 3 on the salary board that you're building, I would say, majority of your lineups with. And when you look at the last 3 Watkins Glen races, Truex average finish is like 1.6. He has a win and then 2 runner-up finishes to Chase Elliott. I feel like I've been thinking about this one a lot. It's like, how do you approach this? I think Kyle Busch is a great PD play, even for the price. You need it. I think he's capable of getting a top 5. He's capable of winning here. I don't necessarily see that from him, but if he gets a top 5 or is fortunate to maybe lead a few laps, if it gets a little crazy, he'll pay off that price tag. The biggest question is going to be does Elliott dominate like he did the last time we were here? He led like 80 laps. If he does that, there's no way that Truex works out price-wise. You need him to do it, and I think he certainly can. But, man, when you start breaking down some of his stats for this year, I mean, he finished 3rd at Sonoma, but he was clearly like a gear behind Larson and Elliott like the whole race. Didn't really do much at Road America. Obviously, he was doing pretty good at Coda before he,
that was a scary accident.
It doesn't really matter. I'm not seeing the Truex that we're typically used to seeing of last year or the year before on road courses. He's certainly capable of it. I gave him a very high impact score, which when you guys check out the rundown, we'll cover all of those. I like him a lot, but man, if Elliott does what he did or something similar to the last time we were here, I don't think Truex is worth the money.
Yeah, because it's going to be very interesting how much exposure I want to have to him, because I think he could be a great alternate to Chase Elliott.
Oh, yeah.
Alternative for sure, but I kind of want to lead with him too. But then I start looking at some of his road course stats for this year. His average finish is almost 15th in the 4 road courses at this point. Sure, Coda. You talk about some of the things that it's skewed a little bit,
Of course.
but he hasn't had the average fastest laps we're used to seeing him have, or the laps led. Those dominator points that you just got done diving into, and how much they matter to be able to gather in such a small batch like we have here at this race. You really want to pick and choose wisely, and I think Chase Elliott really probably has a better chance to do so than Martin Truex based on this year's performance. Basically, you mentioned Kyle Busch and Kyle Larson in that. Kyle Busch, I think it's, we see him very similarly, and I think based on that, I don't want to add too much to that. But the Kyle Larson thing, I think, real quick, touching on that, he's so enticing because he has performed better on road courses this year. You talked about him and Chase Elliott being teammates and how they have had better road course performance. But him with that price tag and his race data here, I haven't really felt good the last couple of weeks about him anyways. They've kind of been in a little bit of a slump. It's not because they haven't been getting wins. We've seen that multiple times, but in the DK Insights portion on our race guide, I mentioned that he has one of the worst negative place differentials at this track over the last 5 races. It's almost negative 12 PD. And when we're looking at how we're trying to get points, negative place differential doesn't help play into the mix.
No, it really doesn't. And while you were kind of talking, I'm looking at this because Truex, to me, I mean, he's had some good runs, but outside of that little stretch where he got those 3 quick wins and was kind of really good at a few other tracks, he hasn't been that dominant. But you don't win a championship over the season long. That's just not how it is. We've talked about it before at length with him, that they're targeting a lot of these tracks that are in the playoffs. Obviously, Watkins Glen is not. He's just really, really good at them. I don't know if he gets that car that really outperforms Chase, because I just don't know if that's what that team is focusing on. And one of the things I was kind of looking at while you were going over some of your points was there's been 22 races. Larson has 19 lead lap finishes. And we know one of those that he didn't have a lead lap finish was Talladega. And that's not his fault at all. And that's not even because it's Talladega. So he was out at the beginning of the race. So you could probably say potentially 20 there. Truex has 16. Chase Elliott also, he's had a couple bad races. But has 19. Kyle Busch has 17. Truex has had some funky races. And I haven't seen the performance, to me, that would indicate that he's a better play over Chase Elliott. He's a better play over his teammate Kyle Busch at this point. Obviously, I'm sure like you will too, we'll both have exposure to him in some lineups. You got to respect the average of 1.6 average finish the last 3 races. But to me, this is not the normal Truex that we've seen in some of these years past. I wouldn't be surprised to see him run top 3, top 5 most of the day, and then possibly late drift back just a little bit. If we talk about the guy at the top of the salary board, the first decision that you got to make, Kyle Busch, in your eyes, is he, again, if you're going kind of lower lineup numbers, is he a lock in your opinion?
He has one of the best paths to value, and he has the ability to get up in lead laps and get some dominator points, but it's going to be a lot more difficult. It's going to take him time. It helps that there is a competition caution, but I don't want to just hone in on him. I want to have an opportunity to mix in enough of these the other two guys, Chase Elliott and Martin Truex, but you can stack them, I think, with the ability of how the middle of the lineup or the middle of the salary board seems to have a decent bit of value this week, and we can find some drivers there that pair, I think, nicely with that you can have enough different builds that include a Kyle Busch and Chase Elliott and a Kyle Busch and Truex, and you can make enough differences without having to spend a lot of money based on those middle tier drivers, I think, that really bring a lot of value this week.
See, I'm at the point now where here's my two biggest arguments for essentially just go ahead and locking Kyle Busch in your lineups. Again, more like single entries, 3-entry max, playing them in some of these bigger tournaments. But if you're playing 150 lineups, don't 150 max Kyle Busch. That would be silly. Here, his average finish is 5.8 over the last 5 races, including 2 top 5s. I'll break it down this way. Coda, he led quite a bit of laps, looked great there. We know how funky that race was. But the Xfinity race was not funky, and he dominated that race in the Xfinity car at Coda. At Road America, the last road course we were at, he had like the fastest time in practice, wrecked his car in one of the practices, went to a backup car, did not do a qualifying lap because they were going to start in the back no matter what. He went from 40th, led laps, finished 3rd. He's starting 20th now at a track he's very familiar with, that he has the best average finish at over the last 5. And he's, other than the New Hampshire race, which he got screwed on, I'll say that. He got screwed by NASCAR on that, obviously, and the weather. He's been potentially one of the hottest drivers. I mean, we talked about it. I didn't want New Hampshire to affect us too much. I mean, we still have him number 1 in our power rankings. I don't know if he's going to have the car to beat Elliott if he's on, but I think Kyle Busch is probably the closest thing to a lock this week that we've seen in a while. That's my opinion.
It's pretty strong. I can't disagree. I think every point you just made, it screams, hey, yeah, there's no reason not to play Kyle Busch. I think there's a lot of other drivers, like I was saying in my breakdown of the situation in the middle tier, that really allow you to do a lot of different things this week. And some of those guys down there, Chase Briscoe, he's somebody that might find himself in the mix. Ross Chastain, Tyler Reddick, Chris Buescher.
Oh, you're going to want to have those guys too.
Yeah, but you can really get funky with it because there are so many drivers there, I think, that have pretty decent paths to value, that the guys that we haven't really talked about, the Team Penske drivers and Kyle or Kurt Busch, even somebody like that, those guys are fairly expensive. So you're going to want to try to find the right mix. And this week, I think it lends itself to making it a little bit more easy, but you're going to have a lot of lineup situations in that scenario.
So before we really dive into those guys, because we got to do a deep dive, I think we don't need to spend too much time on the next 2 guys on the salary board because we've already talked about them. There's not much to say. Chase Elliott, last 2 wins here, or he won the last 2 races here. He's won the last 2 road courses. He's won, 7 out of the last 10 road courses over. I mean, it's something ridiculous. I mean, he is on a tear. Average finish here is 7th, averaging 35 laps led. And that's including a couple races where he didn't perform as well when he was still young and hadn't really come into his own yet. Really good. Best driver rating in the last 5 races. Well, technically 4 for him out of anybody. And he's also at the top of the board by a wide margin over Kyle Larson this year on road courses. Average finish 6.3. Logano slightly better. but Logano no wins. Elliott 2. I don't really think there's much else to really say about Chase Elliott. I think we all know how he is here. Touched on Truex. Kind of already made his case for him and against him. Larson, we touched on him as well. I think the next main guy we got to talk about is Kurt Busch, because that's where you start to get a little bit more potentially funky with it. Now, he's a little expensive. He is going to be $10,000, but he kind of popped a little bit when we were getting ready for this show. In the last 5 races here, he has 4 top 10s. Average finish is 8.2. Average PD is 10.2. Obviously, he's starting further back at 18.4, but he's starting 17th now.
Yeah, he started 17th, and then this year in road course, and the 4 road course races we've had, he has an average finish of 10th, which is really strong. He's got 2 of those being top 5s, which is this year very indicative of him and Ross Chastain's success in road courses. He hasn't had the dominator points that we just got done talking about with some of the other drivers, so I don't think he gets that, but we saw him kind of sneak in and dominate a race earlier a couple weeks ago, and they might be going all in for the win in the last hoorah for Chip Ganassi Racing. It could be an all-in event, and we could see him potentially get out in front and lead some. I don't think that happens, but we could.
I mean, going back to kind of what we said before getting into all the drivers' statistics, what are these teams doing? I don't see them trying to go all out at Daytona, building the best car for Daytona. That's the last super speedway event of the year. Not much point, but these next 2 weeks are road courses where both him and his teammate are doing well. There's no more Chip Ganassi at the end of this year. I mean, obviously, I'm not on the inside there. I don't know what their thought process is, but I'm thinking if they are able to potentially get a win, or get some extra points, get higher up in the standings to help them advance a little further in the playoffs, that's what they've got to be doing. I think that they would be targeting these next 2 tracks for both Kurt Busch and Ross Chastain. It's tough because obviously if you're locking Kyle Busch and you're locking Chase Elliott in, those are fairly expensive guys, and you're going to throw another $10,000. That makes it a little bit more difficult to get some of these other drivers that we like. But he could be a nice little pivot. He might be that nice pivot. Save $900. Don't go with Kyle Busch. Go with Kurt Busch. I would think at 10, he's probably not going to look that enticing to a lot of people. Maybe he goes maybe he carries a really low ownership versus someone like Kyle Busch. I think depending on your personal strategy of how you're attacking this slate, I think Kurt Busch is a really good play this week.
Yeah, I think he provides a great angle from a GPP tournament, the large tournament selection play. I think he's going to be somebody that would be a little lower owned. I think a lot of people will see the same stats we're looking at and want to have him in their roster, but it's going to be difficult with the guys at the top that we got done talking about that really have strong performance history and great paths to value. It's not as easy to see that from a Kurt Busch, but it's definitely there and definitely achievable. Who next is
we got William
list?
Byron next. Starting 15th, he's the 9,800. We're similar on our scores, our impact scores this week, but you're a little higher on Byron. I mean, I'm probably kind of know what your case for Byron is, but why don't you kind of let everyone know your thoughts on William Byron this week? Because he's kind of, I would imagine when you start to build your lineups, when people are kind of scrolling through, especially if they're hand building, they're going to get there. That 15th PD looks good. You know, if you know he's with Hendrick, you know that's a fast car this year. 9,800, he's cheaper than Kurt Busch. And he's got the PD over Logano, who would be next on the board. What's your case for Byron?
For Byron, he's been a lot better this year, and we've talked about it all season long. He's in good equipment. He's been able to get really good results out of that equipment. It was consistent for a very long stretch of the season. And this year, road course-wise, he hasn't had the strongest performance, but it's in the data, I think it shows that the 4 road courses, his average finish is 28th. But it's kind of fluky, some of these points with being at COTA. He was there, Road to America. Things didn't play out the way they intended, and you look at that data and it kind of seems skewed. But again, we talked about all season long, he's made progressions. He's one of those drivers that has actually led in a lot of these events. And
he's led at Sonoma quite a few laps, and he also led at Road America.
Yeah, and it just didn't get they didn't get the result that they were looking for at the end of the day, but they've been strong at times, and if they can put it all together, he could be a great pivot. But I just, where he's priced and with some of the results and everything, I just don't want to get you too hyped on him.
I could see him doing really well here. I think this is a track he could find his rhythm. He should have a car that's capable of going out and doing really well. But that team has been on a skid lately. Maybe this break will help them refocus, because they were one of the hottest teams for like 10 to 12 races earlier this year. But they have really been garbage the last 3 or 4 races. Some of it's out of their hands. But at the end of the day, you can't have that many races in a row where you're just underperforming, even if some of it's out of your control. Those 2 road courses that we kind of talked about, where he led, that kind of seems to be how he was in previous years. Early in the race, he'd be up front. He'd even lead a lap or a few laps, look strong. You're like, okay, maybe Byron's going to, and then next thing you know, he's like hanging out, barely hanging on to a top 20. And we've kind of seen that the last few weeks. I know that he's better than that. I know that team's capable of being better than that. But right now, I think that's going to be one of those things where you're like, you got to be careful, I think, with how you build your lineups. I think Byron on paper looks really pretty good on this slate, but I would definitely be cautious on him.
Yeah, he's definitely somebody to pay attention to maybe next week. We'll see how it all plays out. But moving on down the list, Joey Logano is somebody that, with the way the salaries kind of played out, he finds himself at top Team Penske on the salary board, starting second on the front row. He's got a lot better performance this year on road course environments. Is he somebody you're looking at a discounted rate under 10,000 compared to the other guys to be a dominator in this race?
Well, he wasn't that great at Road America, and we liked him, and he didn't really pop. He's been one of the best cars in the 750 package, which is what we have this year, or this race. But Watkins Glen, even in the last 5, including a win and 2 top 5s, his average finish is 17.4. I believe the last 3, I don't have those numbers pulled up in front of me. I believe his average finish in the last 3 is below 20th. I would think that they would turn that around at some point, especially with that 750 performance that they've been showing so far this year. I don't know, man. With that second starting spot, I could see him getting out front. I could see him getting around Brad. I think he's potentially a little bit better than Brad, but I mean, Brad really, average finish-wise, is better than Logano in the last 5 here. I don't know. I mean, I think I want to have maybe a couple lineups GPP with Logano, but I think if you're kind of targeting cash lineups, I think he's a little too risky, even though he, on paper, his numbers are pretty good on road courses. Logano to me seems really tricky this week to really figure out.
Yeah, I think I'd feel a lot more comfortable with Denny Hamlin, the next guy, because of he's got better road course data this year, just enough to make me feel a little bit more comfortable. I'm not saying Joey Logano is a bad play. I think he's a decent.
He could be the car.
Yeah, so I'm not fading him by any stretch of the imagination. I just don't. I want to pick and choose when I use him and Hamlin, and this muddy middle right here, I think, is going to be difficult, and I think could be the difference maker if things don't play out as everybody expects.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time with Hamlin as well, because I can see him having a good decent day, kind of flirting with that top 5. But with that price tag and where he's starting at, you need him to do more than that to be worth it. So I think Hamlin, possibly from a betting side, if you can get him top 5 maybe with some really nice odds, or maybe even some good head-to-heads, maybe a Hamlin versus Logano, if you can get good odds, I think that might be the way to go. But I think if you're looking at Hamlin from a DraftKings perspective, if you're going to build a lot of tournament lineups, have some Hamlin. But I think he doesn't really have that pay off that salary sort of, not ability, that's not really the right word, but just what we're kind of expecting from him. I think there's some better cars. I don't think that he's going to be the guy that gets out front and leads a bunch of laps based on what we've seen this year and even recently on road courses. I think he finds himself in a tough spot. And personally, I think Ryan Blaney also finds himself in a tough spot. He's next on the board at 9,200. He starts third. He's right behind 2 of his teammates. He's got some decent numbers on road courses. Average finish here in his 4 races here is 11th. 1 top 5, 2 top 10. So that's not terrible. But I don't know. To me, kind of what I said with Logano, I kind of would almost echo with Blaney. I know we've throughout the year have kind of had different opinions of Blaney. Where are you kind of landing at on Blaney this week?
I think it's going to be tough because he only has 1 top 10 in the 4 road course races we've had this year. I haven't seen him or Keselowski, really the next guy on the board, really strong like their teammate Logano in this package. So they've all had good 750 speed, but in road course environments it's a little bit iffy in spots. And I think based on everything and the price tag, I think him and Keselowski, Blaney and Keselowski, that is, they just are almost the identical play, starting first and starting third. They don't have a ton of upside. I don't see them being in the positions to dominate or to continue the extended lead.
Especially with that competition caution coming at lap 10.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
And I think it's just going to be something where, to me, there's more value above them. There's a lot better value options below them. But like I said, this muddy middle, there might be one of these guys that does dominate or is the key to having the optimal lineup. And you want to have a little bit of exposure if you're playing a lot of lineups, obviously.
Yeah, so it's kind of assuming Elliott, Truex, or Larson is the main guy, or possibly even Kyle Busch. To me, I can't really make much of a case for Brad starting first. It's possible. GPP only for me. I don't have much to say about Brad. Is there anything that you wanted to say about Brad? I think the next guy to kind of talk about that a lot of guys are going to talk about is Christopher Bell, 8,800. He starts 7th. He looked really good at New Hampshire last race, sorry. Almost ran Amarola down. He won the Xfinity race. He was second, not really in any sort of the same class as Elliott, but he was second at the last road course we were at, Road America. He won the Daytona road course. Where are you kind of landing at on Bell? Because he's kind of a hard one to talk about because he doesn't have any cup experience here. They won't have any practice. He's not really known as a road course driver, but he has certainly made big improvements this year compared to what he did last year. Again, albeit in different equipment. To me, I think Bell is one of those guys that can really kind of disrupt this slate.
He definitely could be.
I don't think that he will, but I think that he's that guy that maybe gets a little overlooked and then comes in and actually is that guy that is rivaling Chase Elliott.
Yeah, he could be for sure. I'm interested to see where his ownership falls. I don't know if he's priced high enough where people won't want to have as much exposure as they would if he was a little bit less because he is starting 7th. Right. It is risky, but he offers upside. I really, truly feel he's one of the stronger plays on this slate. If you look at this year's breakdown of road courses in our garage thoughts, he has the third most average fastest laps. And you want Dominator points, and he's in 7th with the short run initially of 10 laps before that competition caution. He can find himself right in the mix.
Already ahead of Elliott and Truex.
So he could be very sneaky to find an opportunity to be a dominator in this race. You talked about him not having the experience last year. Nobody raced here in 2020. We're talking about 2019 and 2018 is the back-to-back years as Chase Elliott taking home the wins here, because due to the pandemic, they didn't race here, so the rookies last year didn't get a race. So we look at his Xfinity's history, and he's strong there as well. So just one of those drivers that has been very strong in 750 equipment as well. I really do like Christopher Bell this week, and the way everything kind of lines up. I'm hoping to get a little bit less ownership than a typical week in this situation.
Yeah, I think the way this I agree with what you said with Bell. I think he's not a lock by any means, but 8,800. Certainly you can look his way, and I would say any sort of formatting, DraftKings formatting play, tournaments, cash, whatever. I think he's viable. I don't want to go too much into detail. If you want to look at his stats or check out the rundown, we have this guy rated high, but Alex Bowman would be next on the board. We like him, but not really enough to really make a huge case for him. But I think he's a guy that in mass entries needs to be considered pretty high. Harvick we've already touched on. Neither of us are really on him at that price tag starting there with his performance. The next main guy we got to talk about is Chase Briscoe. We kind of knew that the road courses would be his sort of best chance to make the playoffs. I still have him circled for next week, and possibly getting that win next week at Indy. But he's a guy at Watkins Glen. I don't know if he's really going to be vying for the win, but obviously if they have the opportunity to get the win, they're going to go for it. But I'm thinking, okay, if I'm this team, let's get a top 10. Let's make that the goal to get a top 10. Okay, for your lineups, if he's getting close to a top 10, he can get right outside a top 10 and still be over 5x value with that starting 27th. I think that team, unless they really feel comfortable taking a big, risk on pit road or something like that to get him some extra track position, if it's Truex and Elliott or whatever out front, I think their goal is top 10. Let's get a good starting position for next week, because next week is where we're really focused on. But we won't be able to do that if we're also starting 27th at Indy. Let's get a good pit selection for Indy. Let's get a top 10, maybe right on the door of a top 5. If he does that, he's going to be optimal.
Yeah, it's why it's so important at this time of year to understand kind of how the teams potentially are thinking about approaching these races, because you're exactly right with that. And if they're able to get that top 10, he's 6x value easily. You look at the 2020 road course data, top 10 is no stretch. He's got that done twice already this year in road course races. We've only had 4, and he's done it half the time. Then you look at his average finish in those 4 races, and it's 15th, which is a place differential of 12 from where he's at now. If he gets that, you're still at 5x. There's a lot of things to look at and like about Chase Briscoe, especially at that price tag.
And to be fair, one of those road courses this year, he literally had his hood over his windshield for like a lap or 2 or more. It's insane.
Yeah, that was
the first Daytona.
Daytona
So he's improved quite a bit since then. His average finish is better in the last 3. I think Briscoe's a fine play. But now we're getting into the kind of where this is probably going to be decided. I mean, we've talked about these guys already quite a bit, teased them. Ross Chastain, Tyler Reddick, Chris Buescher, 8,100, 8,000, 7,800. They're all right there. 12th for Chastain, 13th for Reddick, and then more PD upside for Chris Buescher at 24th. Although I don't think he has the performance, the top-end performance that Chastain and Reddick's cars will have. To me, these are all very similar plays and can easily hit that 5x value or more. Of these three, which one are you kind of leaning towards, or are you trying to cram multiple guys in here?
If I'm picking out of those three, Chastain, Reddick, and Buescher, I'm looking at Buescher just because the place differential upside. He has the best path to value because he has been really strong on road courses. You look at this year's data alone, the 2021 road course data that you put together in the Garage Thoughts, his average finish is 14th. He's getting top 15s. He's been somebody that has been strong in road course environments. He's been strong in this package this year. Even getting 14th, which we're right there on that cusp of being in the top tier of drivers that you're talking about with Reddick and Chastain, where we expect them to have to finish in the top 10. He's finishing 14th. I think in that scenario, 5X, he has even more upside potential. So I want to look at him, especially given the discount between the couple drivers there. But I do definitely think that Chastain and Reddick are great options. I really think right here, like you said, really I think where some of the ability to unlock the drivers at the top, these guys really are the key to that.
So I think for me, I would probably rate it as Chastain 1, Buescher 2, Reddick 3. Chastain, he's got 1 top 5. He's got 3 top 10s out of 4 road course races.
One thing, though, I'm going to throw this at you. Since you've been so adamant about where these drivers are at in the playoff scenario, Tyler Reddick, out of these drivers, him and Chastain obviously are the only ones that are on in the conversation, I think, at this point. But he is battling with his teammate Austin Dillon. I think that in itself might give him a little bit more fire. But what are your thoughts because of that? Like, does that give you any more want to play Tyler Reddick than the other situation? And he's been strong in road course environments this year.
For sure. Well, when we look at his last or the 4 road course races, he's got the worst average finish out of those 3 drivers that we're talking about. Yep. 18.5. He has 2 top 10s, no top 5s. Average PD is minus 8.8, but he's also had some good races where he started up front. He got the pole at Coda. I do think that they will be trying to get points. They'll be trying to go ahead of their teammate. To me, I think Ross is going to go in knowing he's safe. He's got a ride next year, but knowing that really doesn't have that same ability to potentially point his way in to the playoffs. I think they're going to go in with the mindset, we're good at road courses. We'll try to maximize the points if we can, but let's try to go for it. Let's go for a win. That could hurt you. That could mean he ends up wrecking or gets off on a bad pit sequence. It could bite you. But I think that they got to go in, get sort of maximum points. They got to be aggressive on the verge of trying to go for that win. Whereas Reddick, I think they're going to be trying to keep an eye on their teammate and outpoint him. Because I don't know if they feel the same way that maybe Chastain's team feels that, yeah, we can win. I think that they feel like they can get a good top 10, maybe a top 5. But I don't think that they really truly think that they got that car that can win. Whereas I think Ganassi, especially with Kurt Busch winning at Atlanta a few weeks ago, I think they got to be feeling pretty good that Chastain has that ability. That's why I'm rating Chastain a little higher than Reddick. And the reason why I'm putting Buescher ahead of Reddick is just because of the PD upside. I can see Reddick playing a little safer, just trying to get right in that top 10, whereas Buescher, if he gets a 12th, 13th, 14th place finish, that's going to be a higher value with his price tag versus Reddick. That's kind of why I rated him the way that I did. But I do see your point.
Yeah, and I've seen and played Chastain at Sonoma where he ended up backwards because he was aggressive, but it ended up working out. He ended up gaining a couple of positions in an awkward, weird scenario, and it played out.
Probably shouldn't have counted.
But it happened.
Yep. So, I think those guys you got to consider. Look at their stats, see how they fit in your lineup. That's the other thing. I mean, you're going to need some guys down below, and we're going to talk about a few that we think are pretty good. You're probably not getting all three in, and you might even have a hard time getting two out of these three in that we just talked about. So check out the garage thoughts so that way you can really narrow down your decision. But the next guy that I think that's worth talking about is Daniel Suarez. We skipped over Benedetto because, he did lead laps at Road America. If that team is turn that ship around, he's worth considering because he's decent at road courses in his history. But the first three that they ran this year at Wood Brothers were not good, and he was not very good last year either. But obviously, Road America was a little different. Could consider him, but I think the next guy you really got to consider is that Daniel Suarez. He's starting 21st. Really good stats here in his career. I know he was one of the guys that I think kind of first jumped out at you when we were first going over this.
Yeah, he jumped out because has 3 races here in his Cup career, and 8th place is his average finish.
2 top 5s.
Yeah, he's got 2 top 5s. He's a guy or driver that in these type of environments, I think you can lean on a little bit stronger than some other drivers. And the road course data this year, it's been interesting kind of the way that team has kind of put things together. It's not as strong as you would like it to be, but in the right environments where I think he shines, Watkins Glen being one of them, I don't have any problem playing him this week. I think that price tag and where he's sitting at with that place differential, it's just enough to be able to be a little bit stronger than I would in most weeks.
So I think at the beginning of the season, going into this, I think most people, including us, would have thought if Daniel Suarez can be kind of competing around that top 20, that's good. But there's probably going to be somewhere between 20th and 25th is probably where that team's going to end up. If they can do that their first year, that's a win. Carry that momentum into next year. But now we're talking about Suarez being consistently a potential top 15 threat and having certain tracks that he has excelled at in his career, and he's taken advantage of that in this car. Watkins Glen is one of those tracks where in his past, like you mentioned, really good. 2 top 5s. It's crazy. Now, those account for, his other race was outside the top 15. That's why his average finish is a little bit lower, but that is really impressive. And we don't really think of Daniel Suarez as much of a road course racer. But if they give him a decent car, he's another guy. If he can get a win, he's now in the playoffs. I'm sure they're going to be like most teams, kind of thinking Daytona might be their best chance because it's such a wild card event. But I haven't looked at the data that closely, but I'm pretty sure that this would be, average finish-wise, his best remaining on the schedule. This could be one of those tracks where he just says, hey, guys, let's go all out for Watkins Glen. We got some work to do, but there are going to be at least 3 cautions between the comp caution and the 2 stage breaks. He finds himself in there. He was leading a lot of laps on the dirt. Very different sort of landscape, obviously, but we didn't expect that from that team either, and they came out and did it. This could be one of those where Suarez really pops. There's a lot of guys that I think that have better equipment than him, but it'll be really interesting to see what Suarez and that team does this year, especially getting all the news with Chastain in that second car. They're set for next year. They got to be just focused on getting the best results they can the remainder of the year.
Agreed. It'll be interesting to see how things shape up. I think the next driver I'd most likely be interested in playing in this tier would be Michael McDowell. I think he's been a road course ringer in the right scenario. You can find pretty strong value with him typically, and starting 25th, 7,200, I think right now, right? His average finishing position and everything associated with this year, he looks like a strong candidate to be another value play and in a value spot. So I really think that Michael McDowell this week, having 2 top 10s this year in road courses, is a great play. We saw him even lead laps a couple times throughout the season on road courses. So to me, I think looking at him as a candidate for somebody in this range is a strong play, in my opinion.
I like McDowell. He doesn't need to do much. If he hits a top 15, he's going to be a little over 5X. I think he's a great play. 7,200 is a little bit more than what I'd like to pay for McDowell. If I could have got this below 7, I'd love it. So I'm not sure how he really fits in to lineups yet. We haven't completely built lineups, or I haven't built lineups out, so I don't know how he's going to completely fall in line. But if you got him, or you got the money for him, I think it's worth it. Because he has the ability to pop. The biggest thing to me is, okay, hasn't been the best on 750. Like horsepower tracks, they seem to be better in the 550s. And starting back where he's at and not having that real fast car like a Kyle Busch has, he could have a hard time getting around people at this track. So it's a little bit more iffy than the way maybe you kind of presented it for me, but I do like McDowell a lot. But the reason why I'm a little bit more hesitant on McDowell than the way you kind of just said it is Eric Jones is next. He's 7,000. He starts 22nd. I wasn't even thinking about Eric Jones coming into Watkins Glen. Zero thoughts about him. He's been, I'd say, average this week or this year's kind of about what we expected. I was kind of hoping for a little bit more out of him. He's had a couple bad breaks go his way when he was running good. Kind of skews the number a little bit, but kind of about what we may have expected from that team. But his stats here and on road courses this year, it's got to be the best. It's got to be some of his best performing tracks on the circuit so far this year. He has an average finish in his 3 races at the Glen. Average finish of 6.3, 2 top 5s, 3 top 10s. That is more top 10s than Chase Elliott has in 1 less race. He has the 4th best driver rating out of the potential 5 races. He's got 104.8. And then when we flip over to this year, Eric Jones, not as high on the driver rating score, but his average finish is 15th in 4 races, and he's finished all 4 road courses inside the top 20. He has 2 of those being inside the top 15. That's pretty good because they have not, the previous driver here is Bubba Wallace, and he is not the best road course. Road courses are probably his least sort of effective tracks for him personally. Well, Eric Jones and that team, they're doing something pretty well because they're getting decent results this year. Average PD of positive 11.3. He's starting 26th in most races and still getting a 15th place finish or close to it. Obviously anything can happen, but I think Eric Jones is set up for potentially a really nice run here.
Okay, can I copy and paste what you just said?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, but yeah, no, he's been very, very strong in this environment, and everything you just mentioned. Even if he gets his average of 15th on road courses this year, with his place differential, it's not that many places gained, but with his price tag, everything aligns to be a 5X driver. So if he exceeds what even that top 15 that we've alluded to, that's big time points. So looking at him in this on this slate, I'm sure other people are paying attention, and he jumped out at them kind of surprisingly too, because he's had strong races here when you go and look at it.
So in my opinion, there's not really that many drivers left. One worth really getting into number wise. I'm not that high on most of the drivers below Eric Jones. Obviously, you're going to have some, because Eric Jones is 7,000, so you're going to have some of these bottom guys. To me, Amarola's probably out, starting 8th. He's not the worst on road courses, but I have a hard time thinking that he's going to even maintain that position. Bubba Wallace, I've already kind of talked about. He's had a few spots. Starting 26th, if he's able to get a top 20 close to top 15, that's certainly worth it. We've seen it, I think, once already this year, but not the stats don't really back that up. Cole Custer, now he's a guy I think you could look at. Had some decent runs in Xfinity.
And he has 3 top 20s on road courses this year, so he has a little bit of upside. I don't think you don't go all in by any means.
No, I think but he's playable at 6,500. Stenhouse, I've heard some people this week, they seem to be really high on him, especially at 6,300, starting 18th. They saw what he did at Road America, but that was about really the only race, in my opinion, that was that great from Stenhouse. I'm not that much on him this week. I think you're maybe a little bit higher on him. But I think the next guy that offers that salary relief, that has upside and isn't just kind of a punt play, is Austin Dillon. I mentioned earlier in the last 3 road courses, his average finish is like right around 12th. Even if he doesn't hit 12th, even if he gets like a 14th place finish, with his price tag starting where he's at, that's still a 5X. And we've already talked about many times the situation that these teams are in. He's in a points battle with his teammate. That may not matter if we get a couple, like 3 more new winners out of these next 4 races. That may not matter, but that's kind of their best bet to make the playoffs. I don't think Dillon nor his team thinks that he's going to win one of the next 2 road courses. But I think if they can come out and still be ahead of their teammate in points, or at least right there with them, they got to feel like, okay, Michigan, Daytona, we have a shot to point our way in or possibly get a win there.
Yeah, because I don't think Austin Dillon has this race circled or next weekend's race circled. So looking at the data, 30th place average finish in his career in 5 races here. Not the greatest, but this year they have been better, a little bit better on road courses. And in the scenario you just laid out, they are definitely in a situation where they have to point their way in, and they're going to do everything in their power to do so. I think with that price tag, man, it's really enticing. Starting 16th, even if he finishes 14th, you're still looking at 5X value.
Because I got to think that obviously they're capable of winning Daytona, but they certainly don't want to go into Daytona knowing that they got to win. That may be the mindset, but they certainly don't want to have their backs that far up against the wall. If they can go into Daytona and just say, look, go out there and run a great race. If it's there, go for it. But if we can get a top 5, which I think is certainly capable from that 3 team, or a top 8 or something like that, and that would be enough to point their way in, that's got to be kind of their goal. And I think that I would imagine that's kind of what they got to have in their heads too. Because they know that he's got really good skills at super speedways, but there's going to be so many drivers going for it, and it could get really ugly, really, really ugly. So it may be one of those where he kind of hangs out towards the back most of the race and then tries to fight his way up at the very end, let all those other guys wreck out. Because I would imagine he's going to be going up against guys like Bubba Wallace trying to win their way, and possibly Eric Jones trying to get a win. He's capable of doing it, even in that 43 car. That's kind of what I'm imagining that 3 team is, their strategy is going into this week. There's not a lot of guys below him that I like. Surprisingly, I would actually say James Davison starting 36 at 5,900. He's in play. Don't love it, but hey, you got to take what the slates gives you. There's really no one else where they're at with what the equipment they have. Is there anyone that you're looking at as actually liking playing below Austin Dillon?
I don't like any plays. Might have 1 or 2 drivers below him I'll dabble with in a GPP tournament, but
LaJoy's had some decent runs in road courses.
LaJoy, I think is probably as low as I would stoop this week. I don't know if Brian Priest really is even. It's enticing, but just where he's starting, it just doesn't add that much upside. So, really, I don't see many guys underneath him as viable options this week. And we'll break it all down in our race day rundown, give you our impact scores, and our impact scores are available below in the description. That's something that we put together in our race guide. That's part of that package. So if you want to go check that out, you can do so below. We definitely appreciate everybody that's watched up to this point. And if you have and you've liked what you've seen, if you could go ahead and hit that subscribe button, it helps us out. We continue to see growth on our YouTube channel and our podcast. If you are listening on our podcast, thank you. We've seen continued growth there. It's been fun to see both platforms continue to grow, and we love the interaction that we get with you on a weekly basis. So if you would like to drop a comment below, if you like something or you didn't see something that you want to see in the future, let us know. We want to have that continued engagement with you, so we continue to cater to what you're looking for. And man, it's just kind of fun to get back to it. Going to do our race day rundown. That will be available on race day. It's a quick video, gets you in and out, all the compact information in a quick rundown scenario. So hopefully you enjoy that. We've been getting great feedback on that. And when we do our weekly DraftKings contest, that is available. And if you want to be a participant in that, just drop your DraftKings tag below in the comments, and we'll get you added to the invite list on a weekly basis so you can be part of that group that we compete against. And it's a lot of fun to put our lineups together in that every week.
Yeah, man, I'm excited for this week. Like you said, it's great to be back. We're back at it, creating a lot of great content for everyone to enjoy. We're always making tweaks and improvements, really trying to get geared up for the playoffs. We're excited for that. I hate that we'll be competing against the NFL in the playoffs, but hey, that's just the way the sport goes. But I'm going to be looking forward to it nonetheless. Watkins Glen is one of my favorite tracks, one of my favorite races to watch. I think we're in store for some great action, so I'm just happy that the break is over. The Olympics are basically over, and we get 14 more weeks of awesome racing, competitive racing. Let's get to it, man. Cheers to being back. Enjoy this weekend, y'all.